Chazak, Chazak,
we stand as one.
Chazak, Chazak,
We must be strong.
Chazak, Chazak, we will go on.
Yaseh Shalom.
Yaseh Shalom. Chazak ונתחזק בעד עמנו ובעד אורנו.
Elokeinu.
Chazak ונתחזק
ביד עמנו
ולמען ערינו.
אלוקינו.
And now, without any further ado, there's a lot to cover tonight because we're dealing with Jewish Lashon Hara, which is a big field. We're talking over here about the Ben-Gurion era. This series is called the Ben-Gurion era at High Noon, Israel and the Jews in 1957 to 61. Tonight is the 9th lecture, which is entitled The Old Man versus the Party, Mapai, in the Golden Age of Ben-Gurion, 57 to 61. So that's Lashon Hara galore. And really, tonight I'm going to be dealing with what generally can be called a Greek tragedy. I'll address that term later on. It's better than a novel. I don't know why people waste their time, as I always say, reading fiction. We are dealing now in the late 50s, the whole 50s, but the late 50s particularly, the golden age of Mapai, unless you're a member of the Herut, which is the dark age of Mapai. And that means that there was a political party in Israel called the Mapai Mifleget Pol Eretz Yisrael. This is the party of Ben-Gurion, the one he put together with a couple other guys, okay? Yeah, that's right. And back already in the 20s and in the 30s, actually. It went through various permutations, but the bottom line is by the time Israel starts, there's a party called the Mapai, and they were the largest party by far. No party in the state of Israel has ever gotten what they got. In the Ben-Gurion era, they always got at least 40, so that means they always got 33% of the electorate, which in Israeli terms is a lot. Now, in our country, we have a winner-take-all system, but in Israel, they have proportional representation, and that means that as many parties as want to compete can compete, and they divide up the votes according to in the parliament according to the percentage you get in the election. So, for argument's sake, if there was 1 million people in Israel and they faced 330,000 voted for a particular party, they would get 40, because that's a third of 120. In Israel, the magic number in the Knesset is 120, and so, you know what I mean, if there were to be a party that got 500,000 votes in that scenario, they'd end up with 60 votes, and so on and so forth. Nobody in Israel, as I'm sure we all know, ever got even close to 60. The closest they'll get is in the late 50s, when Ben-Gurion, you'll see, will win 47, which by Israel's terms, if for a party to get that is amazing and very remarkable. Only in the 81 election was this ever topped. This is Begin's second time, when Israel came as close as it will ever get to a two-party system. Begin got 49, and the Labor got 48. That's a big chunk of 120, isn't it? Right? That's almost 100 seats out of 120. That's very close to a two-party system. But that fell apart, and today it's a joke. Sadly, I know everybody here wouldn't be here if you don't follow Israeli elections and politics. You know, what are they talking about? This party get 15, this party get 20. The top is they'll get 22, 23, which is not healthy for a party system. You understand what I'm saying? This leads itself to the chronic and fundamental instability that characterizes the Israeli parliamentary system, something with which we've grown up. I mean, this is part of the deal. But Israel in its first 30 years and all that wasn't like that. They had such a thing as a leading party, and it was the Mapai for a long time under Ben-Gurion, until it wasn't, as we'll talk about. And in his time, as I say, they had a Tammany Hall machine, and they controlled everything. I know there are people here who have come to me in the audience that their father and mother lived in Israel back in this era, and they're from, and if you want to get even if you're from, you want to get a job in the army, you want to get a job with the government, you want to get a job as a cab driver or anything like this, you've got to be a member of Tammany Hall. You understand? You got to be on there. No, let's go back for a minute. He says, from 1948 to 63, Israel, therefore, is a kind of one-party state. I want you to be clear about this. Now, I don't mean in the communistic sense, because there are elections, and there were people who ran against them, and they cussed them out and called them all kind of names, and things like that, so you have freedom of speech in that regard, no question about it. But having said that, like I showed you in previous years with Salah Shabbati and all the rest of it, if you know how to play political games and you have your hands on the levers of power, and you're able to give out jobs and things like that, hey, in Baltimore we've had that. Does anybody remember Jack Pollock? Do you remember Curran? All these other things. That's how the game is played, Okay, it's legal. Yeah, I know, you, whatever. The beneficiary of the system. Anyhow, all I can tell you is Mapai is pretty doggone monolithic, especially klape chutz, as far as the outside is concerned. Here's Ben-Gurion in the early years putting the party together. Once they were together, I want you to understand this. They were 45. In the first election, there were 46. Second election, there were 45. Third election, there were 40, and then 47. So that's the numbers. And they were organized in the following way. They had what's called sarenu chavarenu. So let's say they want to have a law. I'm just to make something up off the top of my head. Let's say they want to do Obamacare. And seriously. And so what they do is like this. They get together all the guys who belong to the 40 or 45 in the party. They get together in a room. And they say, we're going to work this out among ourselves. We want to do Obamacare. Let's hear all the for and against. And they argue it out and all the rest of it. And then by the time it's over, Ben-Gurion, whoever said, I guess, so what's the conclusion? This and this and this. I want it to be this way. Now we've had our discussion. Now we all walk out with one voice. You get it? It's democratic centralism is the technical term. Now that we've all discussed this, klape chutz, when we go outside, it's when that we stand behind this measure with this and this provision and this amendments. And it's chavarenu. And they had something called sarenu. And that is, if Mapai had so and so many ministers in the cabinet, and they always arranged it, because this was the politics, he always arranged it that number one, Mapai has an absolute majority of members, of cabinet members. So, for example, if the Israeli cabinet will have 13 ministers, so 7 will be Mapai. Get it? That way they can never vote against the party in the cabinet. The other parties can't gang up on them. You follow? The other parties didn't like it, like the Mizrahi and whatever, but that's the way, that was the rules. That was number one. And number two, not only the Mapai always made its business to be in charge of certain ministries, what they called the important ones. The junk they left for the other parties. You follow? So Ben-Gurion didn't really care who's in charge of the Ministry of Religious Affairs. But Prime Minister, Defense Minister, that's the Army, Foreign Minister, Treasury Minister, that's the money, right? Education Minister, that's the brainwashing of the next generation. You understand what I'm saying? As agriculture, that's the kibbutz and the moshav. You understand? These are the government departments that stay in Tammany all hands, thank you very much. That's how it goes. So the Mizrahi always got the Misrat HaPanim, the Interior Ministry, which theoretically might be a powerful ministry, but they deprived it of the police power. So therefore, all you're doing is registering births and deaths and things like that, you know. And this is how the game. Oh, the Aguda wants to be in charge of the post office. All right, you know, like that. Now, I mean, this is what the Ben-Gurion area, and they thought it's just great. So it's a pretty doggone powerful system. Because every time it's an election, by the time the election's over and they form a government, the same group is in control of the important seats and the important levers of power to give out money, to give out jobs. Why does anybody want to vote for, that's what it's all about, isn't it? And national security. The party faithful are rewarded. Here is if there anybody here who lived in Israel in the old days, this is the party card. You want to apply for a job? Let me say, they ask you, like, let's see your... It's like going to the doctor. Was he got Blue Cross? So in Israel, he says, "Oh, you want to get a job as a teacher? Let's see your Blue Cross. let's see this. The Pinkas HaMiflaga. You understand? And then they check up on you. By the way, they make a few phone calls. This person attend the meetings. This person have a reputation for being part of the party. Are they a troublemaker? You get it? This is how the game was played. If you're a non-member, forget it. You get shafted. You understand? So Ariel Sharon was a famous officer in the 50s. He writes this in his autobiography, and he said like this. He joined the army as a lochem, a fighter, against the Arabs and all that kind of junk. But he learned pretty doggone quick that you got one of those cards or you don't got those cards. You want to get higher than a captain? You want to get higher than a major? He said, but I fought in 20 battles. I've led commando teams, all the rest of it. You want to get higher than a major? You understand? Is that your way to go? And by the way, he does. You see? Now, the party under Ben-Gurion is non-political. Of course, when Ben-Gurion says non-political, it's because everybody agrees with me. It's non-political, but officially non-political. But this was the system, okay? By the way, who else gets shafted? The Sephardim that we've talked about at great lengths. They came to Israel. Most of them didn't feel comfortable in the Mapai party for various reasons. They're not going to get anything. The few Sephardim that are going to get anything is the ones that are collaborators, so to speak. See, if the guy will go And believe me, they'll have this Moroccan guy over here, and this Iraqi one over here, and this Yemenite over here, and all the rest of it. And they are that's how you want. And the guy will justify by saying like this: I got my daughter a job. What's your, what can your party do for me? You understand? That's the end of the day. I got this guy, high school, get into high school, because high school was not free. It was not compulsory. He says, I want to get my kid into high school. So tell me when. I ain't got no time for heroics and things of this nature. So altogether, I'm describing a system of what you call the glass being half full and the glass being half empty. The glass being half full during this era, the 50s and all that, is, what's the Mapai delivering? It's a stable, basically centrist democratic regime. By that I mean you have the basic freedoms of freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, not if you're an Arab, but if you're Jewish, right? Freedom of religion, the basic sort of thing. Israel under Ben-Gurion was not a communist country or anything like that. They didn't have secret police, shooting you at all the rest of it. They didn't. You get what I'm saying? So in other words, many people say like this: look, the Mapai, no party is perfect. The other parties will be corrupt too, which is true. Meanwhile, they're putting together. We've got a real country. It's in Israel. It's very far from perfect, but there aren't too many democracies out there, right, with all the imperfections. Even though this, as you can see, this is a wonderful poster from the Cherut Party against. So look what it's saying. It says, "Zeh Yom Shel Mishtar Mapai." This is the real face of the Mapai, which means that the guy all the way on the left, he's the Mavaker Medina. He's the official controller general. So he's supposed to issue reports about corruption. And he issued a report about corruption. So instead of government firing the people who are corrupt, they fired the Mavaker. You understand? But then, wait a minute. But the guy who fired him is Eshkol. And why is Eshkol? He's the one in the middle with the foot. And why is he doing so? Because the evil man Ben-Gurion pushing him to do so. So, that way Ben-Gurion could say, I didn't fire him. You understand? And what is this politics? But this is glass half full, half empty. On the one hand, you see the corruption. On the other hand, it's a freedom of speech that they could put this up. In Stalin's Russia, you couldn't put up a sign like that. You get what I'm saying? So there's pluses and there's minuses to it, as I say before. It's no small accomplishment in the Middle East to have any kind of a system in which you can criticize the government. That's true. It's a pretty stable national security policy in terms of defense and foreign policy. All during the Ben-Gurion era, the same chevra ran the show. So they made their share of mistakes, as will happen, but he had a pretty stable and consistent policy. These are the guys, it's Ben-Gurion, it's Shimon Peres, it's Moshe Dayan, Reuven Shiloach, wasn't so well known in the public, but he's very influential, and Herzog, and Iban. And these are the ones who make the decisions. Should they go with America? Should they go with Russia? How should they go to the Sinai campaign? How do you deal with the United Nations? What do you deal with the Arab terrorism and all the rest of it? And the public kind of like the idea that they have sort of like a strong but normal kind of team in charge of the show. There had been, as I described here in the past, a tug-of-war concerning basic security policy issues between two guys in the Mapai. That was a problem. And I'm talking about Ben-Gurion and Sharet. All right? But by 1957-61, by the time we're talking about in this lecture series this year, Ben-Gurion had kicked Sharet out. It was a bloody business. He fired him, and he was in total control. So if you're asking about the years 1957, 58, 59, 61, and even 62 and 63, there is one guy that makes all the final decisions. Okay? And it's my way to highway. And I guess there's a plus to that, and there's a minus to that. If he gets it wrong, achem vei. But he gets it right. But what's worse is nobody can make it to my Hamlet. Israel cannot afford Hamlet. To be or not to be, He can't afford that. So this is the way he was. Golda Meir, by the way, was put in as Ben-Gurion's stooge to replace Sharet. She'd be a yes woman, so to speak. Now, that's not exactly what she turned out to be 100%, but in basic policy it was. You understand? In basic policy it was. Indeed, the party depended on the prestige during these years of Ben-Gurion as the major electoral asset. After all, they say, who's going to see the President of the United States? Who are you going to put? This schlepper, the head of the cab driver union somewhere, the head of Progressive Party, all the rest of it. The Ekis are okay, the Sfardim okay, but come on, this was the basic argument. And I can tell you something, the broad public kind of felt this way. You understand? What I mean to say is like this. Even the Mizrahi, the Aguda parties, when they voted for their parties because they wanted their interests to be represented. But if you ask them overall, should Itamar Levin be the prime minister? No, Ben-Gurion should handle the Americans, the Russians, the Arabs. But in terms of, local educational issues, Torah issues, is a different story. Economically, the Mapai controls the Histadrut. This was the real source of their power, because the Histadrut controlled the economy. Israel is a funny country, as I said many times, and we all know that, but in respect that first came the parties and then came the country, correct? Not like in America, where first came the country and then eventually emerged the party, the Democrats and Republicans, or in France, or in England, or other places like that. First came the country, and then at some point developed into parties. That's the normal way, because then the parties represent basic interests within the constituency, okay? No, let's hold that back for a second. Oh, you can have that, that's fine. But in Israel, the parties created the state. It's a little strange, right? The parties created a state. Even when they signed the Declaration of Independence in May of 1948, they signed according to the parties. You understand? Who were the people that did it? The Mapai, the Mapam, the communists, the Aguda, the Mizrahi. I just want you to know, they all signed on there, right? The Aguda had representatives that signed on, Yitzhak Levin and Moshe Troll's cousin over there, and other people like that. They did. Mayor David Levenstein and the Communist Party, I want to be clear about this. Mayor Wilner, they all signed the Declaration of Independence, but they're doing it as parties. Now, in the case of Israel, and I'm saving this mainly for a talk a little bit later, the Histadrut created the economy, for better or worse. You know, so they preceded the state. So they created a giant labor union. They used the power of the Mapai and similar institutions to gain control of all the contracts. The Histadrut therefore controlled all the employment and all the employers, and you had to dance to their tune or they'll put you out of business. So there's no other country I know of where the labor union actually controlled the government. In America, sometimes you've had a stronger AFL-CIO, sometimes you've had a weaker AFL-CIO, but you never had a situation where the AFL-CIO controls General Motors. You said that owns, I'm going to be clear about this, where the AFL-CIO owns all the big corporations. You get it? Where the AFL-CIO owns the banks. So this was the source of their power. By 1957, the Histadrut leaders, which is the Mapai leaders, because Mapai controlled the Histadrut. By 1957, they had made the worst of their mistakes already. They made a lot of mistakes because they didn't know economics. None of these guys went to college, so let alone take economics. So they made plenty of mistakes, but they've learned the hard way. Eshkol and Sapir were the ones in charge. Eshkol is the guy who made all the mistakes, and his attitude was, yeah, you screw up here, you screw up there, eventually you figure out what to do. I know that there are human costs to this, but I'm just telling you what happened, and not prettying it up. And by late 50s, they learned the hard way, kind of like what works and doesn't work. And the late 50s was a year of a pretty dramatic economic expansion, although problematic, which is something I'll be speaking about a little bit later. But they had, I think, like a 10% growth rate at that time. 1957, there 61 are years in which the standard of living went up a little bit, if you're Ashkenazic, in Israel, and they appreciated that. On the other hand, the glass is half empty. It's an old boy system, and if you're not on the Mapai, you're on the way out. And let's go back. Let's go back one. Yeah. Do you remember him? Anybody remember him? He was the head of the Aguda back 20, 30 years ago in the Knesset, Rabbi Shapiro. Am Shapiro was a Ger Chassid whose family moved to Israel after the Second World War. And in the 50s, they had business experience back in Poland. I'm just trying to show you how the system worked. Business experience back in Poland. He made his business to be friends with Pinchas Sapir. Pinchas Sapir was the guy under Eshkol who was giving out the contracts. And he said, listen, my family has business making carpets back in Poland. And so we know how to run a factory. And Pinchas Sapir gave him $1 million. You understand? And the idea was that, build a factory, hire employees. Of course, we want you to hire double the employees than you need, but, that's a Mapai issue. On the other hand, but to make that up, we'll give you special government contracts, we'll give you things with the army, and so forth. So it's a screwball way to run an economy, but that is how the system was created. So they created about 500 millionaires. You get what I'm saying? This is the truth. If you play ball and you're in the right place at the right time, and you're willing to play the game, even if you're a Ger Chassid, I'm just trying to show you, but you have business experience, you can get along in the system, but you be doggone sure that you have to, punch all the buttons and touch the clocks and make all the right moves and all the rest of it in there. Now, by the late 50s, the Mapai has its hands firmly on the levers of power, and nobody can beat it. There's our story tonight. In the 1957, Ben-Gurion's controversial policies included Dimona, which you're not allowed to talk about, right? This was a textile factory, as I told you. So that was not up for discussion. I mean that literally. You were not allowed to speak about it in public under Israeli law. The controversial policies also included Shimon Peres's parallel foreign policy in terms of getting weapons from Europe. Golda Meir was the foreign ministry. Naturally, she said, I guess, all foreign policy should run through the foreign ministry. But Ben-Gurion and Shimon Peres, like this, Golda, she's good for raising money. She doesn't know really the foreign policy, meaning not the real stuff. Shimon Peres, this was his golden years. He went to Paris, he went to London, to Bonn, to all over the place, South America, buying and selling, wheeling and dealing under the table. You understand? And these are years where people didn't want to lend Israel, give Israel weapons, and he knows how to do it. You understand? He knows the button to push. He's quite a guy, and he made the right contacts, and he got the right deals, and all the rest of it. And this is controversial because if you're Golda or other parties, they say, what's Peres doing? We don't know what's happening, and nobody did know what's happening. And Ben-Gurion said, I guess you don't need to know what's happening. Just trust me. You see, and says, no, we want to trust you. What's going on? I see Shimon Peres went secretly to Africa. It's none of your business. This is how they ran. This is how they ran the thing in those days. Now, the truth is, getting weapons from France is not controversial, but getting in bed with the Germans is, if it's right after the Holocaust, and that's what they did. Okay, Peres and the Krauts. Oh my goodness, right? Shimon Peres got to be best friends. I'm not exaggerating when I say it, with Konrad Adenauer and the leader of the main party in the Bundestag, which is to the right of Konrad Adenauer, which is Franz Josef Strauss, who was the head of the Bavarian People's Party. That's 1 degree less than Hitler. They aren't Nazis, but they smell bad, It's these are extreme right. And Peres, he said he got together with this guy. He explained Israel's situation and all the rest of it. It's a long story. I don't have the time to go through all of it now. But next thing you know, this guy's the best friend of Israel. You can't you call it what you want, but this wouldn't happen through normal diplomacy. As a matter of fact, 1957-61 in Germany was the golden age of Konrad Adenauer. This is wonderful. Look on the left, and you see how he runs for office in 1957. No change. Look at Obama, change, right? I'm serious. Only in Germany, Konrad Adenauer, kind of experimenter, no change. Meaning these policies are working. Germany was shooting to the top. And they are at the top at this moment. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. Who's paying for all the mistakes of the other countries in Europe? Okay? Frankly speaking, who's paying for Israel's economic mistakes, if we want to be honest about it? Germany's still shelling out a lot of money. It is what it is. They stay rich, we stay poor. There's something of a problem over there. But the fact of the matter is, as an economic powerhouse, Ben-Gurion, to his credit, and Shimon Peres' to credit, they said, a country doesn't have the time to, what's the right word? Be sentimental about the Holocaust. It's terrible and all the rest. It is, we're not, obviously, we're Jewish, but listen, they are what they are. Konrad Adenauer was an interesting chancellor. He was a super old guy, was in his 80s. He was an old-fashioned German. He wanted the American army of occupation to remain. Germany's the only country. It's almost funny. If you remember long ago, we used to have movies like with The Mouse That Roared and all this kind of stuff, which are based on Germany, where they say like this, stay. And by the way, the United States Army of Occupation is still in Germany today in 2015. I hate to tell you, World War II ended 70 years ago, is that right? But the American Army is still there. In other countries, they're attacking, like in Iraq and Afghanistan, they're attacking to destroy the American bases. Only Germany, so I guess, stay, right? Because they were smart enough to realize this is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It stabilized Germany against the Russians. You understand? It shows America's commitment to the defense of Western Europe, and so on. So he was a very smart guy. He didn't think in petty terms. Now Peres, who's an anti-communist like Ben-Gurion, had developed these super special relations, as I say before, with Adenauer and with Adenauer's defense minister, Verteidigungsminister, which is the guy in charge of the German army, which is Franz Josef Strauss. Strauss turned into Israel's best friend in these years. It's amazing. And Germany supplied the weapons that nobody else would give to Israel, under the table and secretly. Franz Josef Strauss visited Israel in the late 50s. Menachem Begin organized a mammoth demonstration of the Cherutniks, Germany coming to Israel, with Hitler. This is terrible. How can the Mapai, unbelievable. And the day before the thing, Peres and Ben-Gurion, this was rare. They called Ben-Gurion in the office and say, we want to show you the figures. You don't know what's happening under the table. And Begin called it off. He said, because they didn't know. They were giving them tanks and all this kind of stuff, and they're doing it for free too. It's quite amazing. Germany they don't sell, they give tanks and all kind of other heavy weaponry. Germany went out of its way. They bought Uzis from Israel to keep the Israel army industry going on. Look, they're checking out the Uzis over there. That's Strauss. You see? They didn't need the Uzis. You understand? But they give them a contract. You understand what I'm saying? That's very good for Israel. Israel's economy. The German the intelligence service, General Galen. Now, General Galen, that's him on the left. That's him on the right. Okay, he was Hitler's chief of the intelligence corps. This guy was a Nazi or whatever you want to call it, and he reinvented himself as the head of Konrad Adenauer's thing, and now intelligence corps. And this is a real intelligence service. I mean, we're not talking about Guatemala over here or something. This is Germany. So they got spies all over the world. It's an international power. And I don't know how Shimon Peres got together with him, and next thing you know, they are buddy like this with the Mossad, and they've remained that day until today in 2015. Again, these are things that you don't talk about in public, but it does happen. And don't you think, listen, you know what happened in Paris yesterday. Don't you think it's vitally important for the state of Israel to have the closest kind of intelligence relationships, spy relationship with Germany? It's sad, if we could, we'd say Germany should jump on. But that's not the world in which we live. And this all starts over there. In the late 50s, the German spy service actually helps Israel organize a super spy, like a James Bond, in Egypt. That's, of course, Wolfgang Lutz. Let's go to the next one. This guy's a German. No, he's not. The Egyptians finally captured him in '65, but they thought he's a German spy.
אמרתי, תיקח אותם על חסותך. קיבל מיד, הסכים. ולא ראה בזה ביטחון אישי, והלך, דיבר בטלוויזיה, ברדיו.
Now, by the way, this is Issa Harel with the head of the Mossad. They found a Israeli officer without a bris. You get it? He was from such an assimilated German Jewish family. You understand? Now, by the way, this is interesting. The father was not Jewish. The mother was Jewish. But they were so assimilated in Germany, there was no bris. That's gold in the spy market. Do you follow what I'm saying? I know you're laughing, but in all seriousness, right, it's a thing. So Galen, the ex-Nazi, took, this is beyond the novels. He said he took this Israeli officer. So this is a guy who was born in Germany, Lutz, and he, in Hebrew they call him Zeb Ben Aryeh, So he says, Lutz, he fought in the 48 war, you know what I mean? He was Israeli soldier, so he grew up in a kibbutz and all that. In other words, he identified totally with the Jewish people, but his father has a Geisha name and passport of that type, and he wasn't from it all, and he came from such assimilated background he didn't have a bris, and therefore the Israeli Mossad, they said, I guess we can use you, and you look like your father, not like your mother. You understand? And I'm serious. And so they gave him to Galen, and he molded him to be a Nazi. You understand what I'm saying? And he had experience in Second World War, so he knew stuff anyway. And it's James Bond. He went to Egypt, and he was like 5-6 years there, very successful spy. And he found out about the rocket scientists in the 60s and all this other kind of stuff. He ran a Nazi riding school for horses, for the upper class. So you get all your secrets. You know what I mean? People hang around, they shoot the bull. Anyway, he said, I guess, I was in such and such an SS division, the other guys thought. So it's really like a movie. And when the Egyptians finally caught him sending transport signals, he stuck with the story, and they believed it, that he's working for Germany. Understand? So a German spy, not so bad. So they put him in for a little while, and eventually they send him back to Germany and all those kinds of stuff. You get it? They never chopped that he's an Israeli spy because he doesn't have a bris. You see? Now, I don't know what to make out of that, but nevertheless, I'm just trying to show you the controversial policies that Ben-Gurion and Peres followed in the 50s, but they said, we're doing it for a reason. Konrad Adenauer even took it to the next level. He went to show how friendly he is to Israel. He even visited the shul in Cologne, and he gave a kiddush over there, right? I'm serious. He's Monte Kiddush. If you're in Hertzberg, but don't get hired in that, Right? Adenauer gives the Histadrut the contract for the German army uniforms. So this is cognitive dissonance, is it not? If you're I'm just trying to show you how these policies can lead. On the one hand, you want employment, you want a job, all the rest of it. On the other hand, you can understand if you're a textile worker in Kiryat, especially if you're a textile worker with a number on your arm, and this did happen, how do you feel? Isn't politics the strangest things? Right? That's why I said, what do you need to read a novel for? Movies, a waste of time. He says, this is in there, and they don't know what to do about all this. This was too much for the other parties in the cabinet. They found out about this. The Mapam and the Achdur Avodah, you understand? The leaders, Yigal Alon and Yitzhak Ben Aron, all these other, but they say, is something wrong with the state of Israel, with Jewish people making arms, uniforms for the German army? Is this nishtarim? And Ben-Gurion said like this, you like it or lump it? Right? We're not doing because we love Germany. Is you got a better idea? Out of this, I get 5,000 jobs. What's your proposal? You understand? And he was riding high at this time, Ben-Gurion, and he said to them, he says, are you a real country or not? If you don't, if so, if you're a real country, you don't have time for Menachem Begin type speeches, right? Because Begin went to South Africa. Read this. You'll see it there. Okay, if you can't see it. Menachem Begin, leader right-wing party, went on a trip to South Africa. And South African Jewry protest Israel's government against the contemplated establishment of diplomatic relations with West Germany, with Adenauer's Germany. The speech to a crowded revisionist meeting, that means the Jabotinsky types, in Johannesburg, City Hall, was part of a series made speeches by Begin and Landau as deputy, special tour, which the South African Federation they charged as a breach of communal discipline because they're raising money on their own. The South African Zionist Confederation is Mapai, you understand? So this is how it goes. Anyway, in his emotion-packed address, I can't believe that. In his emotion-packed address, Begin asked, how could Jews remain silent if the time should come when an ambassador of those whose hands have the blood of our fathers and mothers would be in the Holy Land? He denounced the certainty that over the Holy Land, the most unholy anthem of Deutschland über alles shall be sung. An anthem was sung over the ashes of our murdered parents. No trade deals could compensate for that. And Ben-Gurion said like this, no trade deals can compensate for that? Is that true? I got a country to run. I got mouths to feed. We got to find jobs for people. We got to get money to import necessities. We need friends out there. The Arabs are trying to kill us as it is. Germany's giving us free stuff. Is that true? So I'm trying to show you the very sharp divergence. And I'll tell you like this. Is Menachem Begin wrong? He's not wrong. Let me put it this way. No Jew worth 10 cents doesn't agree with what he said, but you also agree with what Ben-Gurion said. You get what I'm saying? You totally hear what he said, but you understand what Ben-Gurion was saying. So Ben-Gurion used this issue that they complained about the secret relation in West Germany to crash the government and go to elections, because he was confident he would win, and he did. In the elections of 59, this is how the elections happened in 59, the Mapai went from 40 to 47. That was a huge leap for them, right? Mapai wins big. These are the, what do you call it? This is anti-Mapai. This is the Yekis, the German Jews, progressivim. You understand? And so what are they for? They're against the Egel Azov. Who's the Egel Azov? They're dancing around Ben-Gurion and the money. You understand? And what are they? And they're against Maftech HaMiflakti, the key, because in the Mapai system, it's the Schlüssel, as they call in Yiddish. When there's a new enterprise, so if Mapai has a third of the votes, they get a third of the jobs. What are you, a Gouda? You have 2% of the vote in the Knesset, you get 2% of the jobs. You get it? The Yekis, they always got 4 or 5 seats. That's nothing. So they got nothing in the thing. So they're against that. Instead, they're in favor of self-interest. No, I mean principle. Now, the fact is that, look, the whole election ran around Ben-Gurion. Look at the slogan, Hagidu Ken Lazaken, which he copied from Konrad Adenauer. You understand? You saw before. Conrad said, vote for Adenauer, no experiment. Hagidu, this is not a party platform. They say, if you vote for us, we will do X, Y, and Z. They went right for the jugular. Vote yes for Ben-Gurion, meaning he's the only guy that knows what he's doing, and so on and so forth. The other parties don't come even close. I mean, look at this. This is very noble. This is Menachem Begin. And what does it say over there? Chomat ha'ir etika eina gevul Yerushalayim. Right? Hayardain eina gevul artzenu. Hayam eina gevul amenu. Right? You understand? Very noble, all the rest of it. But what does the voter push? Which button does he push on election day? That's the question. And so Ben-Gurion got 47, Begin got 17. Just trying to show you. Okay? So it should be that in late 59, when they had the elections, this should be the finest hour of Mapai and of Ben-Gurion. But it isn't. And herein, my friends, lies a tale. Greek tragedy. The Mapai was started in the 20s. The party had built up slowly over the decades. It was democratic centralist, as I described before. In-house, you can debate whatever you want, but once the decision is made, everybody has to go lockstep with it. Mapai was a top-down organization. You got ahead by kissing up to those above you. That's the way it went. You know, that's all these parties. It's a pyramid. You got, it used to be a joke, I think. How's it go? The whole country is afraid of a mouse. Why is it afraid of a mouse? Because everybody's afraid of Ben-Gurion. Ben-Gurion is afraid of his wife, and Ben-Gurion's wife is afraid of a mouse. You understand? So it's a top-down business. You got ahead by kissing ahead. By the late 50s, by the late 1950s, the leaders had hardened into their places. In other words, there's no new blood. It's the same people every election because they're not giving up. It's always Ben-Gurion, number one, the same musical chairs, right? Golda Meir, they're not going anywhere. They were there in 1957, they were there in 47, they were there in 37, probably there in 27, and they'll be there in 2017. That's how the system is. Like certain shul presidents and boards, their terms of office went on forever, even though their ideas and understandings of the younger generation and the radical new reality of a sovereign state of Israel were out of date and sometimes out of touch, which is reflected, for example, in the anti-Sephardic racism. That was a generation thing. You understand? These guys all came from Eastern Europe. They looked down at the Middle Eastern Jews as, low class and barbaric. Here's Golda Meir, and remember they had the Black Panthers in Israel in the 1970s? It's a famous meeting. They went to Golda Meir when she was the prime minister, and they said there's all discrimination. And she said, discrimination? When you came to this country, she told them in Hebrew, when you came to this country, we had to teach you how to use a fork and a knife. What's that got to do with discrimination? You follow? Assuming that that's true, not that it's true. I'm just trying to show you, it's out of touch. She was from a Dor HaMidbar. You get it? And the Dor HaMidbar doesn't understand the generation that it's in Eretz Yisrael. And Ben-Gurion, all of them as a class were like that. They built the state, but they had a problem with the people that they brought in, and they go on forever. At the same time, life does not stand still. An entire group of young figures who had proven their successes in various roles lusted for political careers and dreamed one day of becoming prime minister. If you're a politician, that's what you dream of. And so these are people. Shimon Peres, Moshe Dayan, Al-Mogi was in charge of the labor, Abba Iban, they were stars. So, a person will say like this, Abba Iban, you're a great ambassador to Washington. And he was. You're a great ambassador to the United Nations. Oh, you're eloquent. No, and he was. Nobody's been like him since then. You should stay in Washington forever. No. And even if he said yes, his wife said no, right? Why? Because why should you do this? You should go back, get into Knesset, run, and tomorrow or the next day you'll be prime minister. And same thing, Shimon Peres. Shimon Peres was the director general of the Ministry of Defense and was doing all kinds of things, as I just showed you, around the world. But and he could have gone on and said, just stay director general of the Ministry of Defense forever. You understand? And after all, Director General is the Mankal. They're the actual civil servants that do the running of the day-to-day business of the Defense Ministry. That's a big business. You understand? Just stay like that forever. Oh no. Shimon Peres wants to get into the Knesset. Moshe Dayan, the same thing. All the others, it's a natural policy in there. They want good spots on the 1959 Mapai list. Now what does that mean? This is how Israel works. It's happening right now as we speak, if you follow the news, and I know many of you do. They don't have a single member district over here. It's not like America, where, what are we in, the 5th district or something? And I forget what kind of congressional district. We're in the 2nd congressional district, it's Sarbanes. And so knows that there's, that's our district, and there's a third and a fourth, a fifth and a sixth, and each one has a particular candidate or set of candidates running for it. In Israel, by contrast, it's party. The parties created the state. They still do. And so what happens is there's a party called, today, for example, Likud. And there's another party today, for example, called Labor. So the heads of that party, they get together in some kind of party forum, and they pick the list to put on the ballot. And so what it means is like this. This is number 1, this is number 2, down to 120. Okay? Now, there's no chance that number 120 is going to get there, because that would mean the whole country voted for it. You understand? I remember they asked Rabbi Porish years ago, he said, when the Mashiach coming? When my father gets elected to the Knesset. He said, what does that mean? His father was like 90, so for honorific purposes, he was 120 on the Aguda list. You understand? So he said, if my father gets elected 120, the Mashiach will be here. So realistically, if you get the first top 10, first top 20, right? Those people are going to be elected. And so if you want to know your standing, see, did you get number 8? Did you get number 6? Some of you may perhaps have followed the Likud shenanigans of the last week or two, in which Feiglin or something got knocked out from 8 to 40 or whatever. This is how the real political bloodletting takes place behind smoke-filled rooms and behind closed doors and smoke-filled rooms. This is what really happens over here. So these guys like Shem Peres, all the rest of them, they say we want to run for office, and we want to run on the Mapai list because that's who we are. But we want to get good spots. Don't put me at 50 and 60. Put me at 5 and 10 or 20. In Ben-Gurion's time, 30 and 40 is also good, right? But not higher than 40 because you don't know what it'll be. And the regulars in the party said, no, these young guys, just like a show where the president of the board of directors never leave, and if a new guy wants to come on, they make a whole big thing out of it, and it's blood on the floor. You've all seen that. Not in Shomrei, it doesn't happen here. But it does happen. It doesn't happen in Baltimore in general, but I heard it happens in New York State and other places like that. I also believe in the tooth fairy, by the way. Anyhow, Ben-Gurion uses his weight to make sure they get good positions so that they'll get elected. The old guys didn't like this. You know what I'm saying? Golda Meir, Zalman Aran, Levi Eshkol, David Peretz, whatever, all the old guard did not like this at all. They get suspicious. Why does Nabi Ben remain in Washington? He's doing such a great job. Does he want my job? Says Golda Meir. The office of foreign minister is already taken. Thank you very much. And she doesn't want to be in a situation where people say, who speaks better? You understand? Politicians are unfortunately susceptible to burning ambition like Macbeth. We got these losers over here. Let's go to the next one. You got these bozos, each one of whom thinks you know this if you know what's going on. They all dream of becoming president of the United States. O'Malley, it's explicit. And I happen to know that the mayor thinks this way. She's going to run 2 times for mayor, then she's going to make it for lieutenant governor and governor, and then it's at the top. You understand? Either through vice. I didn't say it's going to happen necessarily, but crazier things, I hate to tell you, have taken place in this republic, right? Unless, as Bismarck once put it, there's an angel that looks after drunks, maniacs, and the United States of America, But short of that, every politician in the country, because you want to go to the top. That's how it goes. Now, which posts in 1959 do the others want? And anyway, the old guard wonders, why is Ben-Gurion backing them and pushing them forward? Oh, they get elected, they see him sitting over there. What do you think Golda Meir is thinking when she sees this? What do you think Eshkol is thinking when they see this? Whose head is going to roll? You see? This is a question which brings out tensions in the Mapai, and indeed in Zionism and the state of Israel in general. Israel is funny, as I told you, that the ideology preceded and created the state. It's not like America, as I told you before, where Alexander Hamilton and all these guys at the top came after the country was there. Ben-Gurion and Rabbi Maimon from the Mizrahi, they made the state. It preceded the state, okay? The outlooks, policies, and institutions that developed in the pre-state era carried over into the state era. Things like I told you, the party key. So you get a proportion to how many seats you get in the Knesset, which means the Mapai gets the lion's share. And the dominant role of the Histadrut. More importantly, the pre-state Zionism was based on a rejection of normal economics. Had to be. There used to be a slogan, Avodah Ivrit. Now, what does that mean? When the first pioneers came, especially in the 20s and 30s. So think about what I'm about to tell you. A guy gets off the boat, Jewish, and we want him. We want every Jew. How's he going to get a job? Well, he'll work in a field. You can't compete with an Arab. An Arab will work for a nickel. And a Jew can't live on a nickel. At least that's the way they said. Now, you could argue back, well, then live on a nickel. Then that guy will get back and move back to Germany or Poland. You understand? So how are you going to do it? So then the Zionists developed the slogan of Avodah Ivrit, that a Jew should only hire Jews. And they say, we know it's against economics. It needs to happen in order for us to move people here and set up a future state of Israel. Do you get what I'm saying? Zionism depended on the rejection of economics. Now, they did for a specific reason, but they did it. So the kibbutz was never an economic institution. The moshav was never an economic institution, and so on and so forth. All the factories and the enterprises that were created by the yishuv were not, almost never, economically viable institutions. Only during the Second World War were they economically viable because they got a contract to supply the Allied armies. So that was a big contract. But other than that, not. On the other hand, the state of Israel does need a steel industry of some kind, a pre-state. They need factories to create weapons and food and things like that. They needed it. So I'm simply trying to show you that what was a necessity up to 1948 changes radically in 1948. Now you've got a country, and it's not a question anymore of fighting against Arab labor. So then where do you go with economics? Were these appropriate? Now that there was a state, how much capitalism, how much socialism is now appropriate? Are Israeli Arabs to be frozen out of the labor market, which is what they were under Ben-Gurion? Arabs were not permitted to join the Histadrut until 58. They were not permitted to join the Mapai until 10 years later. I just want you to understand that, okay? Can you continue to exclude them from the Histadrut? Do leaders get chosen because they helped to found the party or the union back in 1930, even though now they're over the hill? Or do you promote modern technocrats? Can the country continue to be run by people with high school, maybe, and certainly no college education? Already from 1950 on, Ben-Gurion, because he had to run the country, is criticizing the old guard of Mapai. Although he doesn't interfere in their bailiwicks, because he's solely focused on defense and on foreign policy. He does have a continuing feud, as I told you, with Moshe Sharet, and he's really bothered by the fact that Sharet, who was in the Mapai, often defeated him in the inside circles, in the Mapai forums. He's disgusted with the fact that the party is not objective and fails to vote for him 100% of the time. Because that's what Ben-Gurion is. He says, I'm a Democrat, but I assure you, he's not a friendly guy. Ben-Gurion had no friends. He was not a social person at all. Sharet was the opposite. He was very social. Therefore, he enjoyed better relations with all the Mapainiks, all the party colleagues. Ben-Gurion came, he had respect, but people didn't like him, you understand? Ben-Gurion gets more and more angry until in 56, he demanded that the party fire Sharet from being foreign minister, which was, after all, the natural job of Moshe Sharet. And basically he says, either he goes or I go. And so faced with that, even though they didn't like to do this, they were fearful of antagonizing Ben-Gurion, who was Mr. Security. The party acquiesces, but reluctantly and resentfully. Ben-Gurion had won a battle, but he had sown the seeds of real anger. Oblivious, he assumed that Sharet would get over it and take another job, because that's who Ben-Gurion was. He used to hire people, fire people, dump people, stab in the back, and expect them to go along with it, because I want you to be objective. This is his funny personality, but this is who he was. He said Sharet should take another job, not in the national security area, right? Not in a field that will interfere with Ben-Gurion and his boys. Become the head of the Histadrut or the World Zionist Organization or Minister of Agriculture or something like that. But Sharet never got over it because he was a very sensitive person. Not till he died. His resentment is known to everybody in the party, and it leaves an open wound, making Ben-Gurion always look bad at party meetings. And Ben-Gurion kept saying this, why didn't you get over it already? And that, of course, makes Sharet even more. Thus, personal resentment after 56 at Ben-Gurion coexists with all of his security creds during the late 50s in the Mapai. You understand? So, as I told you, this is a tale. There's the very bitter clash between Golda Meir and Shimon Peres during these years. As I told you before, Golda Meir says, I'm the foreign minister, I run our foreign policy. And then she finds out from others, Shimon Peres last week was on a hunting trip with Konrad Adenauer. You understand? She says, nobody told me, this is not fair. And Peres comes back, he says, I got a $5 million contract for the hunting trip, which is what he did. You understand? I got a contract for us. She's seething. And Ben-Gurion basically says, take it easy with Golda, but, we don't have to tell her everything, but, try to calm her down. Then there's the question, what do you do with Moshe Dayan? Oh, my God, right? What do you do with Moshe Dayan? His natural post, he would have been the chief of the army and the successful commander in the Sinai campaign. And he resigned from the army, retired. So what's his natural job? The Ministry of Defense. That job, my friends, happens to be taken at the moment. Thank you very much. True? Ben-Gurion. And what do you do with Abba Eban? So we had this funny situation in which the old guys are not going, right? And you have these new guys coming up who are talented and capable. And in a normal political system, they would find some way to find something for them to do, and yet they're not doing it. So as I said before, oh, by the way, what about Isser Harel? He's even more angry, head of the Shin Bet and all the rest of it. How come Ben-Gurion put these guys in Knesset and just left me as the head of the Mossad? You understand? It's amazing. They didn't even give me a job. And so the elections, therefore, are successful in terms of increasing Mapai's number of seats, but it opens a can of worms which eventually destroys the party. Now, once the elections of late 59 are over, and it comes time for forming a government, so Ben-Gurion tries to hand out the goodies. Peres gets deputy minister of defense, which is what he was anyway. He called the Mankal, the director general of the defense ministry. He called the deputy defense ministry. The way it works is like this. Ben-Gurion was a very loose manager, as we would say today. This is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. And he only was interested in a few issues at a time. Dimona, big issues in the army, whatever, national security, day-to-day running the military, which is an empire in Israel, with factories and, of course, the soldiers and all this kind of stuff. Shimon Peres can handle it. So Peres was doing the same thing he was anyway. Dayan couldn't be made minister of defense, so they made him minister of agriculture. I can't think of something he's less good at. You understand? So Moshe Dayan will spend a couple years running to Europe selling tomatoes. I mean this, Okay? He got out to his head. He said, we are conquering the Agvania front and all that. I respect his military powers, but tomatoes ain't the Sinai campaign. Abba Eban got the Ministry of Education. That's a waste. You get it? I mean, he's an educated guy. That's probably Ben-Gurion figures. He has an education, make him Minister of Education. That's not who he was for. Yosef Almogi got Minister of Labor right in time for the biggest strike in Israel's history. Almogi was this is the strike where they made the uniforms. I always like this story because it was Kiryat Ata. And it was a terrible strike because usually the government has to say it's okay to strike. But since this was doing national defense, Ben-Gurion said it's not okay to strike. And they struck anyway. So it's a socialist country. We're supposed to build up the labor union, but really it's the other way around. The labor union tells you when you can strike. And over here, since it's national security, it's an important contract for Germany. It's a chil Hashem. You don't want to look bad. You get Germany to give us a contract. We can't produce the uniforms. And so the government dug in its heels, and the workers dug in its heels, and this won't say they won't give in. And it was in the papers back and forth and back, up and down. It was a bloody business. And I don't remember what the end was. I just know how the famous story. The story is that after it's all over, Yosef Almogi, this is how they say it, goes to Greece for a vacation. And when he's in Greece, he goes to the Delphic Oracle. Remember the Oracle of Delphi? That always gave you cryptic answers. And this was the striking Kiryat Ata. So he went there, and he goes to the Delphic Oracle. He said, I guess, who won the strike? And the answer was Ata. I'm just telling you, Ben-Gurion at this point says, I'm above the fray. I leave all the dirty politics to Eshkol. There were a lot of bruised egos. So, for example, Zalman Aron, who was a founder of Mapai, quit because you're giving Abba Eban some of my job, this, it. And into the seething cauldron that already exists of bruised egos comes the revival, the resurrection of the Lavon affair. Okay? Now, perhaps you remember, I don't want to go through all the sordid details. Here, basically, Ben-Gurion started the state was Minister of Defense. Then he quit for a year. You remember that in 53? Maybe you don't know. In 53, from a year, during the year of what we would call 54, he went to state Boker. He said, I'm not the prime minister anymore. Moshe Sharep be the prime minister. And the job of Minister of Defense, he gave to this guy, Pinchas Lavon, who had been the Minister of Agriculture. So a macher in the Mapai party. During that time, the army, they had an intelligence snafu. You understand? The military intelligence, which is a separate unit, they send spies to Egypt, to blow a place in Egypt, but they violated all the basic rules of spycraft, and they all got caught and hanged. Okay, here's you can see, right? One of them committed suicide. The others were hanged. Some eventually got out. It was a whole mess, and it really was a bad thing because they were told to put bombs in the American embassy and places like that, and make it look like Egypt did it. So you can't imagine it's like Pollard times 10. You can't imagine a worse scenario than this. So it's a gigantic intelligence screw up. I mean, that's not even the word for it. And who's responsible? That's what happened over there. So they immediately say, I guess, Pinchas Lavon, he's the Minister of Defense. Lavon says, this was done behind my back. I had no idea. This was a rogue operation, because really, you're supposed to get permission in a democratic country from the top people, the civilians, in order to do so. The lower guy said, you told us to do it. And he said, no, I didn't. And so, yes, you did. No, I didn't. And so they had a commission at that time, and they found out, the commission said, I guess, we're not 100% sure, but we think, I repeat, we think Lavon did it, we're not sure. The evidence isn't clear, it goes both ways, so he should resign. And he was very angry, he resigned, and Ben-Gurion then came in from retirement and became the Minister of Defense. And what should I tell you? This was the resurrection of Ben-Gurion's career. He came back as Minister of Defense. A few months later, he was the Prime Minister, Minister of Defense, and then he went on to what we're talking about now. So the whole thing was quite a sordid business. This General Ghibley, he's the one who really did it. He was in charge of the military intelligence, and him and Moshe Dayan were together in cahoots, and they shafted Lavon. We know this today. And they forged documents, get it, in terms of dates. Moshe Dayan was part of this, and Shimon Peres was part of this. It was a big mess. It's Israel's Watergate, except that in Watergate, you had the American press. You know, you had, what's the name, Woodward and Bernstein or something. In Israel, you can't have that in the 50s. You get it? It's a censorship, so you can't do that. And so all I can tell you is Lavon knew he was being framed, that he couldn't prove it, but this was, at the same time, the trigger to Ben-Gurion's revival as the national leader. Now, the narrative that Ben-Gurion wanted to present was like this. Lavon screwed up, and Ben-Gurion came to the rescue. And that's what he wrote in the Israeli textbooks. Okay? The country couldn't survive without me. I took a vacation for a year. I wanted to retire and just be a regular farmer. And as soon as I went away, everything fell apart. So they had to call Ad Shakamti Devora, Shakamti Ein B'Yisrael. You know, that's a nice narrative. Okay, this government that Ben-Gurion came back in was the government that ruled Israel from 55 to 59. You understand? That was the government that fought the Sinai campaign, and that's the government I'm talking about this year. That was the government that was still in power all through the late 50s. It was brought back as a result of the Lavon scandal. Now, Lavon was given it a bone. They made Secretary General or something or other, and he accepted as a loyal Mapainik. So he knows, even though he knew that he was being shafted, he was stabbed in the back, he said, I'm a party like a communist. I'm a party guy. If the party says to do this, I'm going to do it even though I know it was right. General Ghibley, who really did it, was quietly fired as the spy chief and transferred to the army. Okay? He had lost credibility even with Ben-Gurion because he messed up in a notorious case. Not only with the spies in Egypt, that was bad enough, but in another case as well, what they call the Uri Ilan case, which I mentioned before, I'll mention again. They had a listening, like a special listening device in Syria. They took, the Israelis wanted to recover the device to listen to the recordings. They were warned that this has been compromised, and Ghibley said, we'll send people anyway. And the guys they sent were not specially trained, and so naturally they got caught by the Syrians. So a whole squad got caught over there, and Uri Ilan was a famous young Israeli soldier, and they tortured him, and he committed suicide because they're afraid of giving information. You understand? He was in the Syrian jail, rather than give away anything, he committed suicide. Now, now Ghibley would try to cover it up, but Uri Ilan was the son of Chaver Knesset. You understand? His mother was Feg Ilan, and so it was particularly in the Mapam, it was scandalous, and he was also famous because he's the great-grandson of Rav Shimon Shkop. You understand? Okay, yeah, that's right. Rav Shimon Shkop, among his descendants, had a granddaughter who was a Mapam member of the Knesset, and her son, you know, they were super patriots for Israel and all that. And so in other words, this guy got killed. This was spread all over the Israeli public. You understand? The Frum newspapers played up the great-grandfather, the other one played up the grandma, but it was what it was. Ben-Gurion was not enamored of Gibli, and therefore he already knew deep down, I think, that the guy was a liar, but he stuck by the story that Gibli was responsible, Lavon was the one who was responsible, it's not Gibli's fault, and he went with it. As happens in politics, you just lie, Really, letters had been forged, and the truth had not come out that the entire spy network had been betrayed by an Israeli spy. You understand? Israel has had cases, a number of them, this is the worst, of traitors. Turns out Israel had an officer who was totally not suited psychologically to be a spy. And I'm going to tell you something, this is crazy. Psychology was very far from perfect in the 50s. And Israel was behind, so therefore their psychology was like in the 20s. And this guy had a record as a thief in the army and a place like that as a liar. But the feeling at that time was, it's like a French movie, but a movie is a lie, it's not real. Take a criminal, give him a chance to rehabilitate himself, and he'll perform heroically. No, he won't. A crook is a crook, a liar is a liar, and a cheat's a cheat. And so this guy did the ultimate cheating. Gibli put him in charge of the entire spy network in Egypt, which is crazy. So Gibli had appointed an entirely inappropriate person to the job, whose criminal tivus led him to betray everybody for money. So it's a whole network, it's like 20 people more in Egypt, in Cairo, Alexandria, all the rest of it. Nambach, their carbonas, because of the army. And Gibli will never admit, you don't admit anything. At a secret trial, this guy Avri Elad, who was the spy, at the secret trial, because Israel would never announce this in public, but I just told you. In the Ben-Gurion era, everything kept silent, and the newspaper not allowed to publish it. So the guy was arrested. He was in Egypt. He betrayed everybody. Then he thought nobody knew. He came back to Israel. Then he was arrested, and they had a secret trial. And in that trial, he claimed that Gibli and Dayan had forged Lavon's signature to frame him. Meaning, while he's talking about himself, he said, "Oh, by the way, that other thing was a forgery by Shimon Peres and Dayan. There's a whole cabal, conspiracy." So if you follow what I'm saying, great. And if you don't follow what I'm saying, you understand that it was a schmutzige business. In the aftermath now of the 59 elections, now that Mapai is on top, they won 47 seats. Ben-Gurion Hagidu Ken Lazaken, he's been confirmed nationally as a big leader, and everybody has confidence in him and all the rest of it. In the aftermath of this, a few months after the elections, in April of 60, Lavon found out about these charges. Nobody told him that the guy had confessed in 57, which he knew to be true, and he went to Ben-Gurion, and he said, "Give me a clearing of my name, because I'm associated in all the school books as the guy that messed up in Egypt, and it wasn't my fault, I was friend." Ben-Gurion refused. At this time, in Israel, you have to understand that Ben-Gurion controlled the censorship of the press. This was legal, okay? Here's a book by the official censor, Avner Baron, if you can read it, and basically, it's a kiss and tell book. I mean, 20, 30 years after he retired, he told stories that you're not allowed to tell back in the 50s. So it's not America. We don't have an official censorship in this country. I don't know if you know that. Even during World War II, the Chicago Tribune, a couple of times, told secrets that the Germans, if they used it, would sink the American ships with the soldiers on board. Fortunately, they never picked up on that. You understand what I'm saying? And Roosevelt was furious, but he couldn't call attention to it, because then the Germans would find that, the Japanese. But, you can't, there's no law in this country called Official Secrets Act. But in Israel, there sure was, okay? In Israel, the censorship is official and it's legal. Again, it's part of the law. The censors prohibited all discussion of the affair. This is the unit in the Israeli army. You get what I'm saying? Today, right now in 2015, there's official censorship in Israel, but it's impossible today. Why? Because of, because it is, correct? It's almost impossible to censor it. But they do their best. I mean, listen, they deserve all the help they can get, because we don't need the Arabs finding out our stuff. It's very tough. But you can't keep it down forever. Uri Avneri, who's a left-wing notorious figure from the Olam Hazeh, that was the party of scandals, moral scandals as well, political scandals, so that's what everybody read. And these are the kind of headlines that he had in that time. Dayan is a traitor. So he wrote an article in there where he just changed the names. Instead of Israel and Egypt, Greece and Turkey. There was a minister of defense in Greece who retired, you understand? It was replaced by someone else. And he appointed a Turkish officer, If you can read between the lines, you know what's going on. The public eats it up. Other parties question in the Knesset, and they say, this is great. Is this a Mapai cover-up in the realm of national security? Ben-Gurion is fuming. You questioning me? You know? Eshkol, Levi Eshkol, was number 2 after Ben-Gurion. He persuades Ben-Gurion because he persuades Ben-Gurion to appoint a committee. Ben-Gurion was not good, as you see over here, with dealing with oppositions. He was used, like certain show president, it's my way to highway, and I'm used to getting, my way. And he really wasn't good at dealing with the other side. And so the result is that Eshkol persuades the reluctant Ben-Gurion to treat this seriously and respectfully and appoint a safe inter-party investigation committee. There's one member here from each party. They're all reliable. Moshe Chaim Shapiro was in the Mizrahi. He was a Ben-Gurionik, you understand? And Binyamin Mintz, he's up there from the Polei Aguda. He's going to Ben-Gurion says. This is how it goes. The idea was like this. Israel can't afford a Watergate scandal. You understand? Let's put it away, and let's see what's happening over here. This is all based, Eshkol's idea is based on the following famous phrase from Benjamin Disraeli. Right? As you see, the proper procedure, take my advice, appoint a committee and stave off the crisis. This is what they do. In December of 1960, the committee issued its conclusion favoring Lavon. Hear that? Favoring Lavon. Gibli was forced to resign, and this was a great out for Ben-Gurion. Just like this, we were deceived. Okay? A party commission has found this sort of thing. This indirectly, by the way, implicated Dayan and Paris as participants in deliberate forging of documents to mess over a Lavon. This is what you call the unintended consequences. They mean that 6 years ago, you guys were party to an illegal act. To the old guard, this is great. It doesn't get better than this, right? I mean, Paris and Dayan need to resign from politics. Golda Meir says, yes, I am shocked. Absolutely shocked that there's gambling going on over here. It says, it can't be, I'm sorry, Shimon, you just have to resign from politics forever. Don't close the door on the way out, Ben-Gurion said, no, this is an attack on me. This is an attack on Ben-Gurion. The committee, he says, is pogum because it's composed of politicians. Although he didn't complain about that before he heard what their verdict was. You understand? And so he was fuming, that's, he's screaming in there. Only judges, only a judicial inquiry can clear Lavon. Eshkol kept saying, it's Dayenu. It's over, move on. This is an albatross around our necks. This is the last thing we need. Just let it go, move on. You see, Eshkol knew, and here's the novel, that Lavon was innocent and Gibli was guilty. Through his girlfriend. Hold on for a second. Wait a second. I'll tell you. He says, Eshkol was married 3 times. His first wife was divorced in the 20s. Second wife, he was married until she died of cancer. And then the third time, when he was an old man, he married a younger lady. She was the librarian in the Knesset. She wanted to be the prime minister's wife. He was already prime minister at that time. But in between, he had a girlfriend. And the girlfriend, hear me out. He said, and the girlfriend had been the girl who forged the documents. She had been the secretary in the office of Lavon and the Gibli and all that. You get what I'm saying? But Eshkol didn't want to tell Ben-Gurion, I happen to know, Fragnish Kankashas, I happen to know that Lavon is innocent over there. So Eshkol was trying to say like this, we had a committee, and through a fair evaluation of all the evidence, we've come to this conclusion. And Ben-Gurion is saying, no, I want to find out the truth. Eshkol said, don't push the truth, And so, like I say, you need 2 novelists to put this together, okay? Hold on for a minute. Here is a little clip from Israeli TV. I think there's amazing things in there. Dalia Carmel, hold on for a minute. Her name was Dalia Carmel, and now she's still alive. She's an older person, obviously. And she's saying there, I don't have English translation, but I hope many of you understand enough Hebrew to say like this. Binyamin Gibli told me, and Moshe Dayan told me, Lezayef et ha-mismachim, to forge the documents and put the wrong date, and it's like a Gemara in Gittin or something like this. You know what I mean? How do you know what the date is and all the rest of it? And we're choshish. This really did happen. You understand? And we know this now, but they didn't know at that time. Take a look at this.
התעקשת דליה כרמל על ידי מות בן צור לשנות משפט והעתק המכתב של גיבלי לדיין השמור בכסף.
אז הייתה הרגשה פתוחה שהמכתב הזה לא קיים, המנהג לא קיים, שאפשר לשנות את ההעתק שקיים.
ידעתי שהייתה קבוצה קטנה שסייעה לבנימין לשמור עליו ולהגן עליו בעניין הזה, ולא תמיד בדרך הכשרה.
מוטקה הביא לי חתיכת נייר שבה היה כתוב מה לשנות, מה להכניס. עבדתי על אותה מכונת כתיבה שתמיד עבדתי עליה, והדפסתי מחדש בדף שני קטע שלם שהתחיל לפי הוראתו של הגאון שלא היה שם קודם. המשפט לפי הוראתו של הגאון הוכנס לקטע, לפי הוראתו של הגאון הופעלה הרשת.
Jake, that's enough. You get the general, because most people don't understand it, but anyway. Let me put it this way. She told everything, you understand? And if you understood a few words, she said something about doing something, b'derech lo kishera. Okay? It's nish kosher. Now, Ben-Gurion, when she finds out about her testimony, he refuses to accept it, even though it's evidently true. He demands that the Mapai fire Pinchas Lavon for daring to challenge him. Again, the Mapai, very reluctantly, but afraid to antagonize Ben-Gurion, does so. So this is the second guy that they've done in the career, Moshe Shret and then him. Ben-Gurion is starting to lose his charismatic authority in the party, but he does not realize it. Because if you follow the person I've been talking about tonight, that's who he was. He had his strengths and he had his weaknesses. And one of them was he demanded everybody should agree with him all the time, and he couldn't understand people should get angry at him for throwing his weight around. Ben-Gurion asserts the committee's no good, the party has to agree that it's no good, but they can't. And Eshkol won't. I was the chairman of the committee. I spent 12 months on this business, I can't just throw it out the window. And by the way, I happen to know from certain sources that it's actually true. Ben-Gurion cannot stand opposition. He resigns in January 61, crashing the government and forcing new elections. So I want you to understand what I'm talking about. The Mapai won a giant victory in December of 59. In December of 60, January, Ben-Gurion just broke the government. You understand? No, they took something. Nobody can do this, what you can do to yourself. Nobody can do this. This is electoral suicide. What do you think? He's going to get better in 47? Right? They got 42. You understand? And the nutty Israeli system is in January of 61, he resigned with crashing the government. Elections were set for August. Okay? Imagine if they do that today. There will not be, notice he's a caretaker government from January to August, which is crazy. All right? He stupidly threw away Mapai's greatest, electoral victory ever. This is the Greek tragedy. Do it to yourself. In this completely unnecessary election, called a year after the preceding elections, Mapai goes from 47 to 42. Ben-Gurion tries to form a coalition after the August elections, but he confesses failure 4 days before Rosh Hashanah. I guess it's like slichus, He said, no, I want you to understand. He went to all the other parties, and this time they're all angry. He said, no, we want this, we want that. And Ben-Gurion said, no, I can't give you this and that. And so it couldn't make a party. So you have unprecedented situation where David Ben-Gurion, Mr. Macher, has to go to President of Israel and say, I failed. The coalition partners, the Mizrahi party, and the Yekes, and the Mapam and others, they form a gang of 4. You understand? It's Achdut Avodah Mapam Mapai Lifter. This is Israeli politics of the yesteryear. And they demand more seats, where they want a situation in which Mapai does not have an actual majority of seats in the cabinet, as I told you before. So if it's 13, we want the 7. And Ben-Gurion cannot, it's in the Mapai culture, it cannot be that the others have more actual seats, even combined, than the Mapai does. So, such is politics in the age of Mapai. It's taken for granted they'll be the main one, but they're fighting over the crumbs. Ben-Gurion is disgusted, and he said to the president, I cannot form a government. I'm giving up. And so the president calls Eshkol. Right? He said, you form a government, which is weird. Right? Eshkol was not the head of the government, but he was a superb politician, a dirty politician. That's politics in Israel and everywhere else. It's a weird situation, and some serious Tammany Hall horse trading ensues, as we all know from Bismarck's famous dictum. right? A lot of dirty politics went on in there. Eshkol, and this is classic Machiavellian strategy. The four parties were combined, in a block that they're going to jointly resist any effort to go to Mapai unless Mapai gives in to their demands. He breaks the gang of four by seducing the Pole Aguda, right? Pole Aguda had two. So they said, we'll give you this and this and this. And that scared the Mizrahi into joining, which brings in the Achdur Avodah and leaves Mapam and liberals out. And so he gets his majority and sticks it to the people that were in there. And as he put it over there, do I have it in here? He says, hey, Veno at the Mardona, right? I said, the gang of four was brought on four legs, begging and crawling into the government. In other words, I did a Tammany hole in them, a Bismarck. Okay? So this is all sorted. Okay? The whole thing is sorted. And it's triggered off by one guy's petulance. That's all. Nothing I said over here needed to happen. This is a real country. And it's all because of one guy's mishigas. And Ben-Gurion is not finished. He still demands a judicial inquiry with the Supreme Court into the Lavon affair, one which will issue a guilty verdict against Lavon. You hear what I said? He says, I want a trial, and the trial should come up with the right verdict. You understand? The other Mapai members will continue to say, give it a rest, but Ben-Gurion will not give it a rest. The obsession of his will grow like a cancer in Mapai and will lead to his fall from power in a year and a half. A year and a half later, he quits for a variety of reasons. One of the main reasons is this Lavon business. In the process, he will take down Mapai and they will never recover. Okay? Because what happens is he left office. Shortly afterwards, he thought they'd come begging to him. When they didn't come begging him, he was really angry. So he started his own party, which took 10 seats or something like that from the Mapai. So in the next election, he got like 8, and the Mapai got 34. They took him really down. They have never recovered till this day. This is 2015. You get it? They never got 40 again. In the next election, Eshkol had to team up in an unprecedented way with the Mapam, all the other labor parties to create Ma'arach. If somebody remembers, the labor alignment and all this. Because the Mapai, the big powerful thing, was fatally weakened by the guy that started it. You understand? It's like the guy who created Frankenstein and shot it. So this is a Greek tragedy. The guy who built the perfect political machine broke it. If Ben-Gurion hadn't done this, they were so well oiled, so well positioned, they had their levers and so much power, they controlled the employment, they controlled the army, they controlled Dimona, they controlled everything. Nobody else could have broken it. Ben-Gurion and Mapai could have remained in power at least for another decade and most likely till today. So who says Rabbi Shalom doesn't have sense of humor? I call this a Greek tragedy because the definition of Greek tragedy is a play in which the protagonist, usually a man of importance and outstanding personal qualities, falls to disaster through the combination of a personal failing and circumstances with which he cannot deal. Is that not exactly what I described over here? So Ben-Gurion went down. It's ironic. At the peak of his career, he crashed it, and nobody can do to you what you can do to yourselves. We are done for tonight. Good night.